Thanks. All right, it looks like we're ready to begin. Just so you guys know, we're live on 2 platforms. We're on Zoom and we're on Clubhouse as well. For those of you who are on Clubhouse, if you can go on the Zoom link, it's been shared on the Radio Kurdistan page on Facebook. The code is also 550 90 90. Other than that, for those of you who are on Zoom, welcome. It's great to have everyone here. First off, I want to welcome every single one of you. Very first event hosted by Radio Kurdistan English. This entire project began with a group of people sharing their thoughts on a matter that is near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's the independence of Kurdistan. After only a few months of online networking and engaging in discourse in multiple forms, we've managed to build a community of Kurds throughout the world who aim to bring international awareness to the call for Kurdish independence. And it is for this very reason that I want to begin by thanking each and every one of you for being here and continuing to help build this community that we now have. And with that being said, we are ready to begin our first event, and that's the main impacts of social media on Kurdistan national movement. So what are the main challenges or obstacles that Kurds who identify with their Kurdish identity and nationality face on social media? How has Kurdiyeti or Kurdish nationalism been affected by the growth of Kurdish social media? These are some of the questions that we will address in today's conversation. And we will have a presentation portion where the topic will be discussed in depth. Following this, we will have a question portion for the audience to ask any questions to our guests that they may have in mind in regards to our topic today. And for our guests today, we have Dr. Jiyar Aghapouri, who is a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics and a postdoctoral researcher in migration and displacement, on the UK's Gender, Justice and Security Hub. He has a PhD in politics and international relations from the University of Auckland, and his research and teachings are in the areas of migration, ethnicities, nationalism, social media activism, with a particular focus on Kurdistan and Iran. He's actually written quite an amazing piece on today's topic called Towards Pluralistic and Grassroots National Identity, a study of national identity representation by the Kurdish diaspora on social media. We are very lucky to have him here today. Mr. Aghapouri, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours. Oh, your mic on Zoom is muted. Kakja.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in this world you are. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, first with the Radio Kurdistan Online as a first English initiative by the young Kurds in diaspora. So I'm very happy to be one of your first guests to speak about the Kurdish national identity, especially this topic, and also your domains of activities are very relevant. And I want to congratulate you on this initiative and wish my best of luck for you. Is it okay if I share a few slides with you? Unfortunately, for people on Clubhouse, they won't be able to see it, but I try to make it more relevant for Clubhouse as well. So I don't have lots of visual things, but just a few slides to give you some introduction. I want to give a brief introduction about Kurdish media, and then we will go about online and social media, and then we accept questions from you, Lalo, or from other audience that we are proudly having them today. So I'm gonna share
good to go.
just a slide with you. So these are the things that I'm going to discuss today. First, the development of Kurdish media. Very briefly, I want just to hint on the point that how Kurdish media has come to existence, and then the significance of this media, and also the third part, and which is the main part I want to focus more, or actually the gist of the presentation and today's interview would be on this topic, is the social media and national identity discourse. So Kurdish media, if we start from broadcasting media, by broadcasting media, we mean particularly we mean print media and also TV and radio media. So this media officially started, let's say, at the end of 19th century with the emergence of the first Kurdish newspaper, Kurdistan, which was launched in diaspora by a number of the Kurdish exile, the family members of the Badr Khan, which was launched in Egypt. And that was interesting that the first Kurdish newspaper launched in diaspora officially. And then that is a watershed, a very turning point in history of the Kurdish, specifically Kurdish national movement. So now, after it's more than 100 years that still we have the heritage of the Kurdish newspapers and print media, which created a very rich culture of developing Kurdish identity and Kurdish national movement. The other turning point in the Kurdish media is the radio, emergence of radio. And it is very interesting that also radio started from the diaspora as well. So the first radio are supposed to be, because we still don't have the exact dates for that, but it is argued that the first radio also was launched in diaspora by Transcaucasian Kurds in 1929. And then throughout the 20th century, we have a high number of the Kurdish radio stations, either by individuals, either by Kurdish political parties, organizations, or recently by the semi-state or governmental station that we have both in Iraqi Kurdistan and also in Rojava as well. So these dates are very important. So 1898 for the newspaper and 1929 for the radio. And also the most important one is the emergence of satellite TV, that also satellite TV was launched from diaspora as well by the emergence of the Med TV, which created a very rich and outstanding culture for going Kurds on air, as the term that is coined by the scholar Amir Hassanpour, late Amir Hassanpour, which made the Kurds to sovereign online. So this happened. The sovereignty of the Kurds online happened by the emergence of the satellite TV in 1994, and then each of them, after each point, we have other TV stations, other radio stations, other newspapers, and it is an ongoing process, and we're still having them in the domain of Kurdistan and also Kurdish diaspora. So the significance of this media, if I want to summarize very briefly, are that this media, they all started and developed from diaspora. And then the formulation and reconstruction of the idea of nation, Kurdish nation, I mean the Kurdish modern nation, transition from ethnicity to nation, this has been developed by media. That's why it is very significant that this notion of nation building was created by, or was brought by new media, and also, and particularly the kind identity, the different restructuring of the Kurdish identity and also Kurdish nationalism. So what we have as what Benedict Anderson called he's one of the main scholar of the nationalism. He discussed about imagined community. So this imagined community of Kurds, this definition of who we are, who they are, this otherness and we-ness was created and developed by Kurdish media. And again, I'm just quoting from the late Emir Hasanpour, who mentioned it as a Kurdish media as the organ of Kurdish nationalism. So that is the main significance that I could summarize here. If I go to the main point of today's discussion, which is internet and social media, I can briefly say that the internet media emerged in the late 1990s, and also the social media. The growth was after 2005 and mainly 2010 for social media, after emergence of Facebook and also Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and also recently Clubhouse is one of also influential media as well. Interestingly, social media was also developed by in diaspora as well. So again, I'm quoting from Martin van Bronson, who has worked on this for a while, referring to internet media, Kurdish internet media. He refers to the renaissance of the Kurdish culture and language, which is particularly happened for social media because it provided a space for Kurds to be more interactive, to discuss more, to present themselves, and to reconstruct their definition of the Kurdishness on social media. So these themes that I have mentioned here, these 4 themes are those themes that I have worked during the last few years they have collected from cyber ethnography. So these themes emerged after a study of almost 1 year of the Kurdish social media and the topic that the thesis that I have written about, that I wrote about. These themes that are most dominant themes that are available or are shown or are displaying by Kurds on social media. So the main one is ethnicity, that most of the users that I have studied, their definition of ethnicity, the representation of their Kurdish ethnicity was the most dominant theme that the Kurdish users were interacting with or were discussing about. However, it is different how this ethnicity is defined. This is something else. I don't want to go deeply into that, but I just wanted the main thing in ethnicity was self-identification as a Kurd and Kurdistani. And it is very important among the Kurds in diaspora. So, for example, there were many Kurds from Turkey or from Iran who, when they went to the diaspora, they were identifying themselves as Iranian or as Kurdish first, because of this rate of this waves of assimilation in Turkey and in Iran, or even sometimes in Iraq and Syria, but to a lower extent. But specifically for Kurds in Turkey and in Iran, social media provided them to define themselves, to identify themselves as Kurd. And even when you look at their profiles, when you look at the majority of the profiles, the Kurdishness is the obvious identifier for their identity, this was different before the emergence of social media. The other theme that came up within my studies was culture. So it is being through a process of definition and redefinition on social media. Kurdish culture is being presented and is being reconstructed on social media, and it is available among specifically the Kurdish influencer, the social media influencer, which they want to display their Kurdish culture either through personal identification or through collective identification among, like showing their festival events and the photos, the video of the things that they have done. So the representation of the Kurdish culture, and also introducing the Kurdish culture to the non-Kurds. So this is also happening on social media only, which is very different from the previous media, which we could not do this. We couldn't present Kurdish culture in a limited TV program, but within social media, this has been possible. The other thing with culture was presentation of arts, literature, language, and also the amusement part. There you have seen many Kurdish, funny clips that are being presented or showing in other languages as well. Probably there are many criticism against them, but this is a fact that social media has provided the space to for this sort of activities to be shown and to be represented. Even religion has been a very obvious theme among my studies. And there are discussions of how there were two groups. One of them were those people who were against them, who were identifying themselves as a Muslim Kurd, and the other one as a Kurdish Muslim. So these two questions were evident: how we define, how we relate our Kurdishness and our religiousness. So these two were evident, although in some time there were clashes between them. But the thing that is common in both of them is that Kurdishness that was available in both of them. And then the most important theme was politics. I'm quoting from one of the users who said, "Even our breathing is political." So the occupiers of Kurdistan must be blamed for the division of Kurdistan. So these were the two codes that I am just writing here, because they were very important. They were defining the nature of the Kurdish social media political activities. Most of the Kurdish social media political activities were going on based on these two codes. Our breathing is political, means everything that Kurdish users are doing on social media, directly or indirectly, is related to politics. So this politics could be political parties politics, and could be the politics related to the occupiers of Kurdistan, or those countries which are ruling Kurdistan, or the countries with Kurdistan is being divided between them. So these two themes define the culture of Kurdish political activities on social media. At the same time, social media provided for online movement, for sharing and distributing the rallies and the protests, the gatherings, and connecting a bridge between the Kurds and non-Kurds. These non-Kurds could be governments, or could be the public in European or American countries. So we can say that, here, for political activities, social media provided a kind of informal bridge for lobbying Kurds, for lobbying the Kurdish issues and Kurdish case among the within the diaspora countries. So if I want to summarize this discussion that I have been through within the study, within the thesis and the paper that I have wrote, I can mention these points. Yeah, there is a diasporic connectedness online and offline. So it means that we cannot separate online arena from the offline. So there is a direct relationship between these two. Whatever is happening in offline is being represented online, and vice versa as well. Sometimes online can influence the offline activities. Sometimes offline activities could influence online activities. And there are examples. For example, sometimes in Clubhouse, you hear a discussion and you see the repercussion of this discussion on broadcasting media and TVs. there are also other activities. For example, the cases like Afrin or a referendum in Kurdistan, the cases happened offline, but they had direct implication on social media as well. And this was very evident in diaspora. Another important thing that is significant to social media, and it distinguishes it from this offline media, is this pattern of communication. In offline media, I mean in broadcasting media, as Benedict Anderson says, there is a message. So the message is produced from one source to thousands or millions of audiences. But in social media, we have many-to-many pattern of communication. We have thousands or million of producer of the message, and also thousands or millions of receivers of the message. So here we can have, that's why it takes us to the next step, that is the wider imagined community, the thing that I've termed a wider imagined community, which is very different from what Anderson says in, not actually very different, but different from those imagined community that is a hierarchy imagined community. Here, we can have thousands or millions of perception of national identity. Each of us could be a TV, could be a radio, and could produce this national message to the wider imagined community. So consequently, because of this pattern of communication, in social media, we have a participatory and pluralistic presentation of Kurdish national identity. But again, all of them are sharing one thing, that is Kurdish. But this perception of Kurdishness, or this Kurdishness, or this Kurdiety, is different from what is presented by, for example, a Hawrami speaker, or what is presented by a Sorani speaker or a Kurmaji speaker. So these are the main changes that social media has brought. Actually, some scholars go beyond that, and they say that social media has weakened national identity, or has weakened the imagined community. But I can't buy this argument, obviously, because I still argue that we have this imagined perception of national identity, but it is a diversified, it is a polycentric, it is a participatory national identity that is going on social media. Still, ethnicity is a very driving force. And this is exactly here that it could bring some questions to the very modernist perception of nationalism, that they totally ignore history and ethnicity. Here, in case of Kurdish nationalism, we still have ethnicity, but this ethnicity is going through, is being presented in a social media time. So Kurdish national identity is not like French national identity, which presented 2 or 3 centuries ago. So we are presenting in social media, and definitely its nature has changed. And whenever we want to look at this, if we don't accept this reality of the diversity within the national identity, we will be going a wrong way that the other national identity discourses in the Middle East have been through. So this is what, at the end, I have termed my findings, or this sort of national identity presented as social media, as a grassroots imagined community. So instead of saying a weakened imagined community, or instead of accepting the pure perception of imagined community, I call it grassroots imagined community. And I have come up with this idea at the end of my studies, that we can think about Kurdish national identity like within this photo that I have designed myself. Unfortunately, people on Clubhouse can't see that, but this is, I have here an imagined Kurdistan, this one we have. So this idea is being presented through this media, so through this loudspeaker, which includes all social media. But consequently, what we have still a Kurdistan here, but with different people, different color, different shapes, different ideologies, different languages, and different opinions. And I will stop here, because I'm sure you will be having questions, and then I can still go on the social media discussions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aghapouri. If you don't mind, just because of the feedback, to mute your mic on Zoom for the time being. And I appreciate you going into depth and touching a lot of different aspects on this topic that requires much more conversation in the future. But for the time being, we're gonna move on to the question portion of the interview. For the question portion, we only ask the audience to please stay respectful and make sure the questions are related to today's topic. If you're joining us on Zoom and you have a question, you can either raise your hand and we can choose you to ask the question, or you can type your question in the chat box, whichever you're more comfortable with. For our Kurdish guests who may not be comfortable asking the question in English, you are able to ask it in Kurdish. And we can translate for you. So I'm going to quickly say it in Kurdish. Bo binerani ka Kurdin u İngilizce kan zor baş nabe ya be hez nabe atwanin ba Kurdi perser ka person who tercüme kan ba İngilizce bo binerani biani. So for everybody else on Clubhouse, we will try our best to take a couple questions from the audience there as well, depending on how much time we might have. But in the meantime, I will start off the portion by asking a couple questions to Dr. Aghapouri, if that's okay. You touched on a lot of different aspects, but I want to ask somewhat of a comparative question. And we have, of course, the Kurdish issue of Kurdish identity is a unique issue. We have our own unique challenges that are separate from other identity issues or other independence movements. But we've seen a lot of political movements, specifically independence movements, gain a lot of traction and support through social media. When you look at movements such as the Catalan independence movement or the Palestinian independence movement, you see that they have been able to successfully use social media as a tool to spread their voices throughout the world. And yet there still remains very little awareness about the independence movement for Kurdistan. So my question is, what are these independence movements doing on social media that Kurdish social media is missing out on?
So do you hear me on Zoom now? Okay. So regarding the differences that you pointed about, or the significance of the other movement like Catalan or Palestinian one, first I should say that the Kurds have been even more active on social media compared to the other groups. So considering their population, considering their weight that we have on social media. So we have been active. The Kurdish users have been active. But the thing that makes them more visible is, I can say there are few things. One of them, they are visible because of their language. You know, in Catalan or in Palestinian, so they are using some, particularly most of the Catalans, they are using both Catalan and also Spanish language. And for the Palestinian, they are using Arabic language. So definitely they have more or better audience than the Kurds that we have in this. So, and also considering the diversity of the languages that we have, so this has, made our presence on media less visible. So the more we post on the international languages, and especially dominant languages like English, it makes us more visible. But this hasn't happened a lot by the Kurds, apart from except the second generation of the diaspora. The other thing is the context. So just imagine the context of the Catalonia is in Europe, and the context of the Palestinians are apart from the left and socialist group that are the direct supporter of the Palestinians, there are 22 Arab states as well that are supporting the diaspora, the Palestinian case, so that they have more visibility on social media. And at the same time, I think the other reason could be the lack of an influential broadcasting media. So just imagine Al Jazeera is connected to Arab social media. So whatever is being produced on Al Jazeera on Palestinian case, it has a direct repercussion on social media as well. But we don't have this in Kurdistan case. We still don't have any English TV language, that speaks on behalf of the Kurds directly, apart from very, very limited programs. So these are there are also individual cases. I don't want to blame the Kurds for the individual negligence because it is a systematic issue for me. But I think just I can mention this points: the dominant language, the context, and also the role of broadcasting media which support their cases.
Perfect. Thank you so much. As much as I would love to follow up with that question, we have other people that are in line. We're going to start with Mr. Pejwak. If you have a question, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lalo, and thank you, Kakmani, for preparing this fruitful, actually, debate and discussion. So I do have a question for Mr. Aghapouri. You were mentioning, or you're defining a new concept called grassroots imagined communities, or grassroots. What was that?
Grassroots imagined communities or grassroots national identity.
Okay, so don't you think that the whole concept of the imagined community, which was presented by the Benedict Anderson, was a kind of a theory of hegemony, a theory of a kind of a hierarchy and the kind of a power discussion in nature of power discussion. I mean, don't you think that actually we can say that the social media means that you are giving the print and broadcasting power or tool and bring it down into the lower level of the pyramid of society? And so it's not of that nature. So, I mean, the social media does not follow the hierarchy that it was proposed under the imagined community theory or from the power politics kind of a mindset. So don't you think that the social media is actually a counter tool or counterbalance mechanism to the print and the broadcasting media? I mean, the whole, see, this is the problem, especially for the Middle East. The border were drawn by the Orientalists and for their benefit and whatever. Okay, so the definition of nationalism and national identity, okay, in the Middle East especially, was not pretty much kind of a scientific or kind of academic. So, I mean, what I'm saying that we have two different definitions of nationalism. One is a top-down pyramid, imagined communities, which utilize the print and the broadcasting media, okay, to push down a certain narrative or ethnicity, okay, and they draw borders and they define nationalism and the kind of a country and stuff like that. However, we have an old classic definition of a nation, which is saying that you are a nation when you have common language, common history, common economy, common psychological makeup, and common culture. So you know the culture. So I mean, this is the two different definition of identities, which unfortunately the Benedict definition is against our reality and our fate. And social media actually, it's our media, it's our print media, it's our broadcasting media, even though it's a peer-to-peer, we call it grassroots, but that's grassroots. I mean, sorry, I don't want to counter you or criticize the way you look at the things, but what I'm saying that actually this is a fair playground as a chance given to the lower level of that pyramid, and now they can actually counterbalance the whole narrative. Don't you think so?
Yeah, thank you, Pejvak. Yeah, Pejvak. Yeah, I can agree with some part of what you said, that the idea of modernistic approach to nationalism has a sort of hierarchy nature. But in terms of Anderson, we have to take it with a grain of salt. That is the thing. So in terms of Anderson, it still has the hierarchy nature of, for example, what Gellner says for building a nation that is a high culture, so building from the top. But the terms of imagined community also has a kind of participatory connotation. So for Anderson, we can't say, we still take it from the modernist approach, but it is different because it gives more significance to the people. There is the people who define this nationness, this we-ness. But again, as I said in my presentation,
I'm interrupting you. The problem is that in the imagined community, Benedict Anderson specifically mentioned that the print media and the broadcasting media, for example, it says somewhere in the middle of the US, it was a flood. So they induce the feeling of compassion through the nation. So the main tool is under the control of the state or the higher pyramid. The participatory kind of a part of it is basically a consumer part of it. People consume it. They are not producer.
Of course, I accept it because, and also he goes even beyond. He speaks about sovereignty. He said that a nation without a sovereignty is not a nation. It's like I always bring even for students of nationalism when I want to define this term of Ben Anderson's concept. I say that for Anderson, nation is like a car, it's like a vehicle. So it define other, for example, this state of imagined community and also this geography and these things. But the engine of this nation is state. So without sovereignty, without the state, we don't have a nation. And my argument in social media is exactly what it is exactly what according to what you say. I am discussing about a many-to-many pattern. In social media, it is not a state pattern of nation definition or elite pattern. This is the public pattern. But this is the point here. We have to, as I said, we have to take it with a grain of salt. I will remind you about this quote from George Orwell. He said that all animals are equal, but some are more equal. Please do not, when it's just an example. In social media, all users are different, are equal, but they are not always equal. The influencers, the elites still have the main role. If you look at this Clubhouse, there is, for example, a group of 1,000 users, listeners. It's only 4 or 5 of them who are influencing the audience. In social media, look at Instagram. There are millions of Kurdish users in Instagram. How many people are influencing the construct? I'm speaking about the constructing of the concept. So what I'm saying is we have to take a medium between these things. We have to be, we shouldn't go extreme on taking the theories. It is not, social media, it is a participatory platform, but it is not that participatory that for example, millions of people could have their influence. They could have their message. They could have their voice, but they are not influencing, as, for example, an influencer or an elite, or, for example, the members of a political party or some people from the government can influence. So what I am doing here and what I'm saying within this discussion is that we still can argue that Anderson's argument is applicable, but with moderation and modification. Because, and I am taking this exactly the idea of imagined community, how, because to me, nation is a modern phenomenon. Nation is different from the perception of, for example, Kurdishness or Persianness or Turkishness that we have from 10 centuries ago, or many people go to the 20 centuries ago about the perception of Kurdistan. So I'm not talking about the Kurdish culture or Kurdish ethnicity or the historical development of the Kurdish identity. I'm just talking about the modern aspect of Kurdish nation, which for me, it emerged from the last century, from the end of the 19th century to now. But to me, it's a process, and social media is also one of the one aspect of this process.
Thank you for that answer. And for future reference, for those who are asking a question, please just ask the question, and we're not going to allow for follow-up questions only for the sake of time. We want to get as many questions in from as many different people as possible. So next, I believe, was, I want to say Kak Majid, Mr. Majid, you are next. And then we'll move on to Edan next. Please, Mr. Majid, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for your this evening. Sorry, my English is not that good, but I'm trying my best. Actually, I want to thank you, Mr. Jiyar Aghapouri, for his presentation. I just wanted to add something to his presentation about the effect of the impact of the social media in the Kurdish nationalism, which was maybe I missed or it was not mentioned. It is the integration of the Kurdish nationalism, because while there was print media in the diaspora or radio media in diaspora, the diaspora community and the Kurdish community in Kurdistan were separated. There was no any interactive dialogue between them. So the social media has built a bridge that integrated the nationalism of diaspora with the Kurdistan, which means that the understanding of the Kurdish needs and the Kurdish nationalism from the grassroots in Kurdistan and diaspora is more closer. This is part one. The part two is the Kurds, among other Kurdistan parts. For all parts, they have been able through the social media to find each other, to build a dialogue within themselves, and this dialogue actually helped to understand each other. This common understanding of each other has helped to grow the Kurdish nationalism in a realistic way. One critique that, or one of the weaknesses that the Kurds has in the social media, especially in the Twitter, we don't have such activity as let's say that the Twitter diplomacy. Which could be organized, as Mr. Jiyar mentioned this is the speech as well. So this is maybe the things that I wanted to mention. And once again, thank you very much for this presentation.
So unmute both Clubhouse and
thank you. I just want to say something about what Kak Majid just meant. Thank you. I agree with your first part, that this sort of interactiveness or the interaction that has been created or developed by social media. So this users, for example, people can from every spot of the world can talk with each other. But one thing that I want to please allow me not to buy your argument is that is the role. I still think that broadcasting media has influential role, and also broadcasting media had influential role in making this connection too. Just imagine, the number of the calls that people were making from let's say a small town in Rojava to Met TV or to Rosh TV or to Teshk TV, especially in 2000 from 2005 to 2015. That social media was not that dominant, and even now there is a connection between social media and broadcasting media, especially TV. I just in answering the question of Kaklalo, I just mentioned that one reason that the other diasporas or other nationalist cases like Palestinian or Catalan or Scottish are more visible is because of the role of the broadcasting media. So there is a connectedness. So it's like a car which has four wheels. If one of these wheels is not working properly, definitely this vehicle is not going in the desired speed.
Thank you, Jiyar. Sorry, I'm just balancing two platforms at once, and it's a little hectic. But the next guest that we are going to hear from is Mr. Yuval. Yuval is actually a Noor activist, and he is quite active on many different social media platforms. He's an academic as well, and he has some familiarity with the Kurdish cause. For those of you on Clubhouse, you won't be able to see him, but you'll definitely have the pleasure of hearing him. Mr. Yuval, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, and I think there's a lot of things in there that are absolutely right. Thank you so much, Dr. Aghapouri. One question I wanted to ask had to do with this notion of ethnicity versus nationalism. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on whether or not you think that social media has increased or decreased the distance between Kurdish nationality and Kurdish ethnicity. Because one way of thinking about perhaps nationality is just to say that nationality and ethnicity are one and the same. And if social media has increased this sort of grassroots imagined community, then one might think that it's increased the sense in which people feel more ethnically Kurdish and start to identify Kurdish ethnicity with Kurdish nationality. And then after that, the drive is for statehood. So making, on the one hand, a clear distinction between a state as a political entity, and in that respect, might the need for things such as state media and the like, more formal media houses might be necessary for a state. But for nationhood, ethnicity, I wonder if you think that the gap between ethnicity and nationhood has been closed by the use of social media, or to what extent do you think that's a possibility? Thank you.
I'm also bouncing between Zoom and Clubhouse, so it takes. Okay, thank you very much, you all. A very good question. Actually, you just dragged me to the theory again, because I have to explain ethnicity and nationalism again. So, the domain of social science is very complicated, and even political science. But believe me, one of the most complicated area is nationalism and nation. So I have been studying or even teaching nationalism for many years, but still I am really hesitant to say what nation is, because it is a very complicated, there are thousands of definitions from different perspectives that define nation. But if I say from the most common definitions, and in a very simple word, based on my perception of the modernist approach, because I believe that modern is a nation construct. So it is different from ethnicity. And this ethnicity could become a nation. It's very simple. Ethnicity, the difference between ethnicity and nation is like, some people say that ethnicity is that nation that has been an ethnicity that become politicized and going toward a nation and form a nation state will become a nation. So it could be Kurdish, Palestinians, French, and German, and so we have ethnic groups. We have thousands of ethnic groups around the world, but not all of them could become a nation. So this nation, first of all, they should go through a politicization process. When they go through a politicization process and they go into the stage of forming a nation states, this is, we can say, the completion of the nation building formation. But I don't agree this kind of, quantification of nation, that if the nation build the state of their own, they become a nation. To me, nation is a process. Even when you form a nation state, you can't say that I am a nation, because until you form this, until you give this source of identity to people that we are one nation. Just imagine what happened in Afghanistan. For example, one of the thing that made this failure, that caused this failure in Afghanistan, was lack of nation state. Although they have a nation of a country that is defined in the category of a border and sovereignty and this geography, this history, but they didn't have this sense of belonging to that territory. In Iraq, it's 100 years that they are working in the building a nation from different ethnicities, but they were not able to be successful in this because they haven't formed this imagination that we are one group. So we have two sort of nations. One, nations that are merging based on the historic ancient or historic ethnicities. For example, like what we have in Germany, in China, or these groups. But they are going through a process. We can say that they are, for example, 100% nation, or 80%, or 90%, or 50%. We can see nation through a process. A stream that to where in that nation you are. So for the Kurds, we are, I can quote, the thing that happened, the quotation from Erickson, he said that for Kurdish nationalism, we can say proto-nationalism, or many people would argue about Kurdish nation as a quasi-nation argument. It doesn't mean that we don't believe that Kurds are nation, but in terms of political side, we can't argue that Kurds are a nation because we still don't have this engine, this statehood for nation. But we can say that from the cultural and social aspects, Kurds are nation. And then this is exactly answer your question. So ethnicity and nation are exactly the same if we take it from cultural aspect. But if we take it from the political aspects, they are two different things. So ethnicities can become a nation, but not all nations are adopting the one ethnic groups. Social media, the second point of your question, this social media has created platform for both of them. It doesn't matter, it's for national activities, for political activities, or for ethnic activities. It has created a platform for all sorts of discussions. It is an arena of informalities and non-orthodox discussions. So the things that you can't do online, offline, you can present on social media.
Thank you very much for that. Moving on to our next guest, we have Sarah. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Hi. So a few things. I think first, just I'm still unclear if this discussion. I think when people are talking about a nation, sometimes there seems to be a bit of an elision between whether we're talking about a nation state or a nation. And if this is a discussion about I mean, Kurdish independence, you know, a lot of people would not want a nation state. There's a big anti-statist movement, of course, from Öcalan. So I'm a little confused about the use of nations sometimes. And just listening to the discussion, actually, I was thinking, you know, when you were talking about ethnicity and nation, I mean, perhaps in the way that Marx talks about a class for itself, maybe a nation is like ethnicity for itself, but it doesn't have to move to a nation state. I don't think that it's incomplete without there being a nation state. But also I've a question specifically about social media. You've been talking about it as a very sort of democratic force, but of course, anybody who's been involved on particularly Facebook, I would say, but probably others as well, are very aware of, if you talk about various Kurdish things or put up a picture of Öcalan, you're off that social media, and it's a very controlled space, and it's a space that's, of course, policed very much by the Turkish state as well. So I wonder if you could comment a bit both about those very overt controls and also, you know, what the algorithms do to how much we're seen or how much we're talking to each other in our little bubbles, and how, you know, if political things can be very controlled in how much is being seen. And, you know, certainly Facebook at the moment is getting very difficult. Yeah, so a comment about that sort of control, both the overt political control and the algorithms. I'd be really interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for the question. Actually, I think I answered part of your first question just before, but just to reiterate it, just part of that. Ethnicity and nation, as I said, if we take it from the cultural aspect, they are the same, because even for those concepts, but a concept that defines an ethnicity, part of that it could comes from that define nation, they could come from ethnicities. So ethnicities are political, nations are politicized ethnicities. So for those nations which are coming from an ethnic background, but we have also nations which are not adapting ethnic background, for example, like US, like some of the European countries, like Switzerland, or those countries which have different ethnicities. So we have two patterns of ethnicity, two patterns of nationalism. One, nationalist groups which are coming from those nations which, or the majority of the nations which are formed from one dominant ethnic group, and the other nations which have different ethnic groups. So this is part of this. So we have to define these two sort of nations. And then, yes, you're right, some ethnicities could not look for becoming a nation. So this groups will remain just as an ethnic group. For example, in New Zealand, you know, Maori are those people that have been colonized by English people, by the Britain or the Europeans. At the moment, so they are working, or they are looking for their demands within this nation of New Zealand. So while they are keeping their ethnic background, so they are not looking for forming a Maori state or a Maori nation states within New Zealand. So they are an ethnic group looking for having influence or for going to the government within the New Zealand state. So they are keeping their own identity as an ethnic group. It could be some ethnicities could avoid proceeding for nations if their demands or if their national rights are met within that geography. So it's not always that all ethnicities could go for forming a nation. And again, the definition of the nations and nation states are very close together. So as Ernest Gellner, one of the dominant scholar in the area of nationalism, he said that nations are or nationalism or nations is this concept that the geography of those nations is congruent with the political sovereignty. It means that when the political geography of a nation and the national or cultural geography of a nation are similar, we can say we have a nation state within that geography. So, and it is the question of chicken and egg that people say, which comes first? Either it is nation that is building a state, or it is a state that is building a nation. So both could be true. We have the examples of both of them. Some nations which fight for their nation, for their statehood, and they form a state. And also we have states who tries to build a nation out of this geography. So again, this is a very tricky discussion, and because the borders of the defining borders are very close together. It is something like the discussion of dialects and language. If we take it from the linguistic perspective, many linguists believe that dialects or language are the same. Some people say that dialects are those language who have armies. You know, a language, a dialect which has army could become a language. It means which has power. So it has power to be represented. It is the same for ethnicity and nation. Those nations which have been politicized, which have political demand, they could become a nation when they have their state of their own. And for the second part, you know, the control over the Facebook. Yes, in Turkey and Iran, we have this control and surveillance again on social media. But still, studies show that despite this control, we can see the voices from Turkey and from Iran, from the people, from the Kurdish people, or from the other national minority groups, you know, within this country. So what does it say? It means that despite the control, despite the very intense surveillance, still social media has this power to transmit the messages. Even the Facebook is banned in Iran, or sometimes even there are discussion that they want to even ban Instagram and other social media platform. But social media is much easier to use than the other media. For example, when a satellite TV is banned in Turkey and Iran, it is almost impossible to access it. And it takes lots of time, efforts, and even money to access a satellite TV. But for social media, it's not like this. Despite the ban, despite the high control, they have this potential to be accessible again by the users. It's definitely not as much as, for example, the diaspora people could use, but still they could use it. Most of, for example, my fieldwork that I did, most of my participants were still from Iran and Turkey, despite the ban of social media in these two countries. So again, I say we shouldn't see it black and white. You say that, okay, this one is when it is banned, people can't use it, and when it is open, everyone can use it. It is a very relative process. So, but what I say, I'm just comparing it with other media. In comparison with the other media, social media has this capacity to be used for transmitting and for constructing and reconstructing the national messages.
Thank you very much for that answer. Sorry, could you mute yourself for the feedback, Mr. Jiyar?
I'm about to, but I can't do it on Zoom. I don't know, it said ask to mute. Oh yeah.
Okay, no worries. The next person up is Adan Anwar. For those of you who don't know who Adan is, he's actually a young Kurdish activist in Sweden as well. He has his own podcast called Between Sun and Mountains podcast that's available on all platforms. Adan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Kak Lalu, and thank you so much for the presentation, Kak Dr. Aghapouri. I really enjoyed it. So I was just wondering briefly, how do you think the ever-growing digitalization of social media will affect the risk of alternative facts, as we've seen through the last couple of years, spread amongst Kurds and their political activism? Because you did touch upon the topic of broadcasting increasing, with that the risk of alternative facts and other types of disinformation spreading as well. And we see that Instagram have implemented live TV, IGTV and such. So what do you think the future is for Kurds and their political activism? Thank you.
So what's your question? Because really this sound is not very good with me. So do you think the effect of digitalization on broadcasting media or on national identity or national movement, you mean particularly?
The effect of digitalization on the alternative facts spreading regarding Kurds and their political activism on social media.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. So for political activism, it is like the other example, like the ethnicity and discussion of the culture and these things. First of all, I think digitalization of the Kurdish movement can result more diversification, and also maybe people might see it as a fragmentation in Kurdish political movement. And we can see it visibly on social media. You know why? Because there has always been fragmentation within Kurdish national movement. And that's why it is one of the failure that we can see. So history of Kurdish national movement, unfortunately, has been drenched with stupid rivalries between the groups, tribes, sometimes cities, two cities, political parties, and now even between between elites, it's regardless of the ideology. But in broadcasting media, these differences, these fragmentations could be controlled. But when this fragmentation goes into the public, its control is difficult or becomes impossible sometimes. So we can see that Kurdish movement, while it has been more active now, it has been more represented, and it has a wider audience. The more audience we have, the more diversities and fragmentations we will have. This is a reality of the new media. And this is not just about Kurdistan. It's about everywhere. It's about Europe, Britain, New Zealand, Canada, Iran, Iraq, Turkey. But the thing that makes it more critical about Kurdistan, it's the nature, the status of the Kurds, that sometimes political fragmentations, am I still on Clubhouse? Because I just got a call, I think it was disconnected.
You're good.
Okay. Can you hear me on Clubhouse?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So this political fragmentation, when it goes through this non-orthodox and or non-familiar or informal context of social media, it becomes wider and less controllable. This is the fact that we have to. So how can we look at the case? If we have this perception that Kurds are just one group, one nation, one group, one political party, one ideology, definitely we should see it as a negative thing. But if we change our approach and see Kurdish nation as a diverse nation with different demands, with different opinions, with different language varieties. So in this case, it is not a threat. It is sometimes a positive thing that makes Kurdish national movement distinguishable from other movements in the Middle East. It makes Kurdish movement more democratic, more participatory. And whether we see it as a fortunate or unfortunate, we have to accept it, because we are building our nation in a different time. We are building doing our political activities in 21st century. It is not like what France did or French people did in 18th century, or most of the Arab states in 20th century. They did it in different time. The context was different, but we are doing it in a different timing. So also, when we are doing it in different timing, our mechanism, our tools, and our approach should be different. And this could happen only through accepting these diversities and looking through these diversities from a democratic approach.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. We're starting to run low on time, so if we don't get to everybody's questions, I apologize. I'm just trying to get everybody in the order that I saw. So we will take a couple more questions, Doctor, if that's okay with you, and then we'll go into the final transition of just me asking you a couple questions, go to the conclusion of the event. So we have a question from Mr. Gatucho Asafa, who is a Tigray academic who's based out of Alberta, Canada. His question is essentially asking the role that genocide and atrocities that have been committed on Kurdish people, what role does it play in social media or in Kurdish social media today?
So this is a good question. Also, it's very difficult to answer this question because what we can see from social media is definitely genocide has become an integral part of Kurdish history, and Kurdish history sometimes is being viewed from that perspective. So, and this is represented on social media. We clearly see this. But unfortunately, genocide, or especially Anfal or Halabja genocide in Bashur, has not created a culture for Kurds to redefine themselves, to make it to make this genocide make it useful for their political claim. Whatever we see from the Kurds, and this is really a critique that here I'm making, the thing that we see from this genocide culture is this presentation of victimization of Kurds. But we haven't used that. If we take it an example of, Japanese Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this created a culture of production for them. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we have heaps of, factories, we have heaps of, production culture, a sense of nation based on learning from the past. Focus, whether it is political elites or from social media or from the youth, normal people on social media, we have not learned any lessons from the genocide atrocity that that was committed against the Kurds. So whatever we see on social media is just a remembrance, but it hasn't. I personally, I haven't seen any useful, useful result or production out of this representation of genocide. So as I answered very briefly, say yes, it has been represented, but this representation, it was just a simple representation. It hasn't worked on a way to reconstruct Kurdish identity, on a way that they learn a lesson from that, and also to give them a change, give them a change on the way that how their Kurdish nationness should be rooted and should be presented based on from that genocide, not only just by victimization of the Kurds. We only have a sort of victimization representation at the moment out of the genocide.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. We have Mr. Walat. Or Mrs. Walat, I need you to show your face first to make sure. There we go. Mr. Walat, the floor is yours. Please ask your question.
Hello, have a nice evening, and thank you for this nice event. We have had quite good points about how social media can impact or have impacted Kurdish movement and different aspects of so-called Kurdishness. But one point which was not discussed at all is that the negative aspects of social media. At least if you look at how the social media is used by I cannot say by all Kurds, but by many of the Kurds, that it has got to a point that many people who would like to be more active in social media, but they are somehow stopping to do that because they get quite a lot of negative comments and negative discussion, even if they are not part of Kurdish politics or government or whatever. I just had a few minutes ago, there is a very, very nice news by Rudav saying that 7 Kurds have been selected as a member of parliament of federal in Germany and Berlin. The first 7 comments here, what they say. The first one says that this is a very bad thing for Germany. Second one says that even if the president of America becomes a Kurd, he's only a Kurd. Third one says that we have a very wonderful parliament here. Now it's turn of Germany. The next one says that this doesn't have anything with us. And then next one says that this is they cannot do anything for Germany. I mean, these are just a few examples. I'm reading the first comments which came after this news was published by Rudav, and even if they talk about whatever, the comments which are coming there, they're running people to a situation that even if you have a good thing to say about this news, you're not going to do that because you're sure that you will get many bad comments and many bad atmosphere, and you will not have a good feeling by joining this kind of discussion. I think this is one point of social media, that everybody can say whatever they want, but since there are trolls, first of all, which are doing this kind of things. There are people who are not happy with Kurdish politics, and then there are, of course, also people which are funded by enemies, and there are many kind of other people. But the worst thing is that you do not see good comments at all, because people stop to do that. So how do you see this situation, and what are the reason for coming to this situation, and how can we do something to get this negative atmosphere to change it, to get some positive things in social media and the social media discussion? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Kagula. Thank you for your question. First of all, I am a social scientist researcher. So in social science, we hardly say positive or negative. You know, we say how from what approach we are looking at the case. I just made an example earlier that, for example, with the fragmentation that you just pointed out rightly, yes, there exists a lot, but it depends how we are looking. If we are looking at the Kurdish politics as a unitary phenomenon, definitely we see this fragmentation as negative. But if we see it, no, from a diverse perspective, it's not a negative. So let's avoid using negative or positive, good or bad. Okay, let's see it as a social process, as a phenomena, as a social phenomena, so that we have this thing. So I will, going back to one concept, one theoretical concept from Erving Goffman. He says that he has a good concept about, he said the concept is dramaturgical conception, means how users show themselves. It's so those examples that you mentioned could be related to the many robots, could be related to different, intelligence services groups, which are very active. Each government today, especially in the autocratic government or despotic government, they have special ministry for just distributing propaganda, and social media is definitely a good place for them. So we are not talking about these things. We are not talking about, for example, one people who is making 1 million comment every day through just one clicking on internet. These are different. We are talking about the social trend. So the social trend that social media has created. So this social trend, and we are comparing it to the previous media. Within this context, we can say that we have more participation of the Kurds in their political nation-building message. This is exactly what Kak Pejvak as the first question mentioned, and this is what makes Kurdish national movement less hierarchical. So this is the significance. But I agree that we have these issues. When it is less hierarchical, we can say we have more participation of people. And it is like everything else. When you just imagine in, I don't know which country you are, but for example, in Sweden or New Zealand, when a law is going to be passed, it takes 3 or 4 months. Just a simple law. But this law, if you take it to the Turkey or Saudi Arabia, it may pass in 1 minute or 1 hour. Okay, so does this mean that the Sweden one, is bad because it has taken that much, because it has been discussed for thousands of hours in the parliament, but the one is, for example, Saudi Arabia is good because it has been passed in one hour? No, because like everything else, the democratic phenomena takes time. There are more fragmentation, more diversities with them, but they have better results. So a nation that is being built based on participation is much stronger than a nation that is being built by the order of someone like Reza Shah or like Ataturk or like X and Y and Z. So this is the thing, that if we want to go through the nation building in the modern 21st century, we have to accept this. And for the political side, the differences in political side, it is not coming from the people on social media. It is exactly coming from those people, those political parties that are making their messages. You know, it is surprising to say that, for example, even like those governments, most of the Kurdish political parties, they have some services or centers for themselves that are just working in cyber security and cyber propaganda against their rivals. So don't believe on those things that, for example, you see 1,000 comments under Rudao. Just look for them and see none of them are real people. You know, you can hardly find some real people in those comments. So we are looking for those studies that I have looked. I have observed 100 Facebook pages, but all of the data is coming from the real people. I knew that these are real people. I have questioned them about their own the authenticity of their pages or their account. So we are here, we are talking about the real people, not those robots that are making misinformation based on their own political agenda. This is different.
Actually,
and Kurdish social media also, the last point is that it is representation of the offline media. When the offline media is, offline ground, when the offline ground is quiet and calm, social media is calm and quiet. So there is a direct or reciprocal relationship between these two. Actually,
my point was that because of those, the real people are not getting involved because they are just running to self-censorship because the atmosphere is now negative. And if you compare it, for example, to Finland, where I do live.
Mr. Walat, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because we can't allow follow-up questions. We're on a strict time.
But just a short comment because this is important for this discussion.
We can have a discussion later on, but unfortunately we have other people waiting and we don't have too much time left, and it's not fair for the rest of the audience. They won't get the opportunity to ask their questions. So I apologize, but if you can mute your mic, and we're gonna move on to Kali Jaff, who is an activist, a Kurdish activist out of Scotland. She's actually joining us on Clubhouse, so she'll be asking her question off of Clubhouse. Hopefully our audience on Zoom will be able to hear it as well. Kali Khan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lado. Thank you so much, Dr. Jiyar, for your insight and knowledge on the subject.
Sorry, Kali Khan, if you can speak up just a little bit, just for our audience on Zoom.
Yeah, of course. Is this fair?
Yes, just a little bit louder, please.
Perfect, no worries at all. I'm just gonna shout a little. So thank you, Dr. Jiyar, for your knowledge and expertise on the subject. It's a huge interest as a public relations and strategic communications master's student. And as of recently, I've taken a strong interest in the PR use and advocacy within the Palestinian Liberation Movement and their implementation of PR strategies on social media. I do believe it's problematic in some areas. However, from what I've studied, it's very organised and it is with direction. So in regards to the nation building movement from a PR and strategic communications perspective, do you think the noise that we see from the diaspora on social media is problematic due to its unsynchronized direction, due to the political and religious differences within our communities, particularly when it comes to the topic of building solidarity through social media? And just in addition to that also, I understand the exploration of social media research as this study of phenomenon is often very subjective. When we are carrying out this research, as you've said yourself, there aren't necessarily positives and negatives. So I'm curious to know what your suggestions would be in strategizing a synchronized nationalist Kurdistani movement to further advocacy efforts for establishing a kind of consistent progress in the nation building process.
Your mic is muted.
Public relations, social
Your mic
media
is muted on
very,
Zoom.
It's widely accepted, and it's very.
Jiyar, your mic is muted on Zoom.
Okay, is it okay now? Yeah. Thanks, Kale, for the question. Social media, you rightly pointed out to the role of social media in PR as well. It is very, very relevant. Going to the questions, I think nation, yes, the recent development in social media, especially in diaspora, has created problems for the Kurdish, especially Kurdish policymakers, if we call it policymakers in terms of Kurdish movement. You know why? Because of two things mainly. There are actually many things, but I just specify two of them as the main points or challenges. One of them, the Kurdish diaspora, specifically Kurdish diaspora on social media, sometimes it becomes very idealist. And when it becomes very idealist in expressing the demand, it is not matching what's going on the ground, what's going on the realities of the region. Because, you know, Kurdish nationalist movement is a territorial movement. So it has a territorial base, and this territorial base is a geography called Kurdistan. So when you are in diaspora and you have this, you know, this free domain of social media, you could become very idealist. That sometimes it's not matching. So one of the challenges, this mismatching between the political process, what's going on between political parties, among political parties, or even within the among the people in Kurdistan, in different parts of Kurdistan, and also what people in diaspora would suggest or propose. The other thing is this challenge of statehood. You know, the representation of statehood. So how you define yourself on social media, it is very important. You know, in online ground, in offline ground, there is limitation. But in online ground, you don't have this limitation for presenting yourself as a Kurd. If you go back to the profile of people on Instagram or on Facebook, almost everyone has identified themselves as Kurd, but you can't do it in the formal documentation in Iran or in Turkey or in Iraq. So this mismatching that has created by social media, and it could be organized in a way that social media, the diasporic group on social media could influence a better representation of national identity in homeland as well. Regarding synchronization of national identity, it is really difficult for me to suggest or propose anything, because it's a really wide it's a domain, a very wide ground. So what we can suggest, what we can propose is that, based on the discussion that we just had now, we said that you could represent yourself as we could identify yourself based on a Kurdish identity. So each individual in diaspora, if they can use the diaspora, the social media, or make the most of the social media or what social media has provided, they could be a message sender or message receiver. They could create a national identity. But in all this sort of presentation, what the users need to know is that they are responsible for they are responsible for the people in homeland as well. So they should not think about what their real dream is. They should also think about the reality, the context that is going on in Kurdistan. So if we try to make a match between the expectation and also what's going on in real ground, we could make Kurdish social media a sort of informal lobbyist platform within the countries that we are living in, Norway, in Sweden, and this one. So because in these countries, the policymakers listen to the public, they listen to the social media. Most of the prime ministers or ministers or the influential people in government, they use social media before the mainstream media now. So we can use this provided platform as far as we know what we are asking. For example, if you ask your Norway government today and go, okay, why you are not recognizing Kurdistan as a country? So definitely no one would listen to you. But if you make it more realistic and say what you want and use social media for that request, definitely social media in diaspora could be influential in not only making a national message, but also in developing the Kurdish demand into a sort of lobbying lobbying type, rather than just being informal and presenting a victimization of the Kurds.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you can just mute your mic on Zoom real quick, Jiyar. Thank you. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're gonna go into the conclusion portion of our event. Kakmani, if you have something to say or if you have a question, please feel free, the floor is yours, and then we'll go straight into the conclusion section.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Dr. Aghapouri, for a great presentation, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity. Actually, I'm very working a lot about, on crowd psychology and the impacts of social media on crowd psychology. So for me, as I see the impact of, not according to any study, but according to my observations, so I can see that the biodynamic factors are weakened because of overusing the social media among people, especially among young people. And this is somehow, it is also weakening the common traits of being socially active, and this could also cause a kind of collective alienation. So do you see any indications about these impacts of social media and what I mentioned right now as collective alienation, which is, as you know, which is very dangerous for defeatism among Kurds. So I will appreciate if you have any experience about this or any study about this that could confirm that social media has this kind of impacts on crowd psychology. Thank you.
Thank you, Kakmani, and thank you for organizing the event as well. I really appreciate it. You were one of the main organizer of the event. Thank you. Sorry, do you mean alienation? Yeah, do you mean the cultural alienation of? Okay, so, or yeah, probably you might mean assimilation as well. Assimilation, alienation. Okay, so for answering this question, I have to mention something about this. So when a migrant goes to a country, it goes through a process called acculturation. Acculturation means how a migrant is approaching that, how approaching socially into that culture. So this acculturation process has 4 steps or 4 types. One of them, the best one, is integration. So integration means someone could have the culture of himself or herself, at the same time the culture of the country equally. So in most of the democratic states or diverse states, now they are going through this sort of integration. Then we have another part, which is separation. Means the migrant keep its own culture only for himself or herself, but become alienated from the culture of the host country. This is called separation. Another type of acculturation is marginalization. It means that the migrant can't neither remember his own culture nor accept the host culture, marginalization. The worst one is assimilation, that this migrant is getting assimilated or alienated from his own or her own culture, and then 100% accepted the other culture. So we have this, it is very common in when you speak about this acculturation process, there's 4 types. So what is going on in social media? I think we are not going assimilation. The Kurds, I mean, I'm sure you refer to the 2nd generation of the Kurds, not the 1st generation. Because the 1st generation, they clearly speak this posting Kurdish, they speak in Kurdish, and very few of them interact in the languages rather than Kurdish. So for the 2nd generation, I think we should be realistic about this. So before social media, how the Kurds were, and after social media, and also the timing. So it is still, for me, it is still an advantage to see, for example, a 2nd generation Kurd, someone who is born in Sweden or in Norway, even if she is posting 1 post in a year in Kurdish, because we have to be realistic about this. So these people are more Swedish, more Norwegian, nor New Zealander than Kurdish. Even now that they identify themselves as a Kurds, still is more than enough. But how in social media, as I also pointed out before, it's important that how we channelize their activity, how we make the most of their potential in redefining the Kurdish identity, and also in finding a lobbyist or creating a kind of lobbying from social media or social media lobby. Now, for example, some diaspora like Indians, they have this. They are more powerful. Social media in India are more powerful than the Indian government, for example. So, and the one main reason is English, because their language is English, and they could easily connect to the both public and private and government sphere in those countries. So in Kurdistan, the 1st generation is not capable of this. They can hardly communicate. Not only the people, even the member of political parties or the representative, they can't communicate well. But the 2nd generation of diaspora can communicate this. So I think they are already assimilated, the Kurdish generation, the Kurdish 2nd generation of diaspora. So we should think like this, that how we can change this assimilation to integration. So even in this integration, still their Swedish side is more dominant. Still their Canadian sides is more dominant. I'm not talking about very particular cases, like, for example, Kaklalo, who is born in Canada, but maybe his Kurdish side is. These are exceptional. We in social sciences, when we doing a social research, we are not speaking about exceptional cases. We are speaking about the trend. For example, now we say that the Kurdish language in Iran is under threat. We are speaking about a trend. We are not speaking about very few people who speak and write Kurdish very fluently and perfectly. and even on social media. But how many are they? If you look at the social media of the Kurds, you can't find 50% who write or speak Kurdish fluently from Rojava, unless they have been a writer or poet or something. We are speaking about the trend. So unfortunately or unfortunately, this trend about the second generation is from assimilation to integration. It's not like something we have an ideal case and we should avoid, or we should keep this ideal case. No, we don't have an ideal case. The ideal case is, yes, this is ideal case that Kurdish diaspora is active politically. It is one of the most active diaspora in the world. If not the first, it is one of the most active diaspora. Look at the cases. And it is also, we shouldn't ignore the role of political parties. For example, they were very influential in bringing this dynamism. So we have to see all sides of the coins. So, but for the second generation, again, I say that we have to see them from a kind of realistic perspective and helping them to become integrated, not assimilated within this. And social media are useful for this because they can have this connection with the homeland. And thanks for your question.
Thank you very much.
Kak Lalo, just one thing, I think Kak Hassan Qazi wanted to have a question because he had been in media for a while, so I would like to hear his question if he's still on the stage now.
I would
like to hear Kak Hassan if you are here, because I invited him as a speaker, but I think he is in the audience now.
He's welcome to come up if he's able to.
Okay, so if he's back, yeah. If he's back, yeah, please just invite him. Just maybe because he had a question, I think.
I need you to mute your mic for me to ask him. Otherwise, there's going to be feedback. Otherwise, Kak Hassan, if you're there, please come up. If not, we're going to move on to the conclusion portion of the event, just because we're running out of time. It seems that Kak Hassan isn't there anymore. I don't know if you can still see him.
Okay, yeah, I think he maybe, I don't know who has turned him back to the audience, but I just invited him to, maybe because he's one of the person who has been in the media for a while. So I wanted to, if he's back, please, let him ask the question and then maybe talk. Then
I saw him come up. I saw somebody else come up and immediately go down. I don't know if that's just a problem right now or, but if you can invite him again, please do.
Yeah, I'll just ping him again.
Yeah. Other than that, we've come to close to the end of our discussion. I did have one question for you, sort of to wrap everything up in the meantime. So we've touched on a lot of different subtopics in regards to Kurdish social media and Kurdish media as a whole, where we've talked about many of the different problems in the greater Kurdish community. And now I want to hear you talk about some solutions. Oh. If you can just mute your mic real quick before, yeah, thank you. I want us to talk about some general solutions. Like, what do you propose would be the first step to making a change in the scene of Kurdish social media? If you were to wrap up everything that you mentioned in general, what would be the next step for the international Kurdish community to somewhat strengthen their influence or strengthen their position in social media platforms as a whole? What's the next step?
Yeah, so I think I pointed out some things as solutions, in one of the questions. I think it was in maybe I was in Kale's question that contains some solution, but again, I will just reiterate them again. So first, it's difficult to provide any solution here, because for any solutions we require a better study, and also we require some social policy approach or social policy methodology. It means that we have to consider all aspects, all political, social, economic, cultural aspects in order to provide us a solution. And also, social media is not an area for providing solution, because social media are areas of ruling all. Everyone can rule. It's the rule of all for all, you know. Again, I repeat that quote of this, the George Orwell one, that all are equals, but some are more equal. It is exactly like this. So here, all are equal mean that we can have our own presentation. So in our own presentation, we have to consider these things. When I'm saying we, I really hate being very normatively speaking, you know, like we have to do this, we should do this. I really don't like to mention these things, because it is a sort of normative analysis or normative present, and I am not into that one. I usually like to speak empirically, you know, from the studies that we have done something, rather than going very theoretically and imperatively speaking. But as a simple, or maybe as a result of our discussion, let's say, we can say that from these things we learned that on social media we can be available, and our presence matter. So everyone could be present. It doesn't matter that you have to always produce a context. Even one share or resharing makes sense. You know, it is important, because you will see people hear what others says, and this is a kind of exchange of information. So if you are active on this one, you will get more audience. So we should know that everyone could be a TV, everyone could be a radio on social media. So we know we should acknowledge our role, our presence, and then we should see what are the issues that are most important to be addressed, because we can't speak about everything, and if we speak about everything, we don't get the audience do not trust us. But just imagine if someone is a writer and it's only speaking about its own writing issues. One is politician speaking about its own political issues. One is a singer. One is a salesperson. So if we know our capacity and also our opportunities, we get a better audience on social media, and we can relate everything to our Kurdish cause. So for all of them, we have to know that what cause we are rooted from. We are rooted from a nation that has a legitimate demand for being a citizen, for having a state. So if we have this national cause in our mind, we can implement it to our daily activities. This is important. And the other thing that is very urgent for us is the role of language, because Kurdish language is under threat, both in diaspora and also in the homeland, particularly in Iraq, in Iran and Turkey, these two countries. So even one post in Kurdish give a legitimate role to the language. So it is very important. So maybe some people think that it doesn't give me enough audience, but we can have we can use multiple languages on social media. So the role of language, giving when you write in Kurdish on social media, it doesn't matter what dialects or varieties of Kurdish, but when you write to this language on social media, it brings it out from the family circle to a kind of formal circle, to a kind of public sphere. So when a language goes to the public sphere and becomes more formal, it could survive better and more, especially when in today's 21st century, when it is under threat both by the globalization threat and also by the policies of the states like Iran, Turkey, that they have given language no status, no formal status in that. So this is also an important one. We have also we have to be also to avoid being too idealist on social media. These are the things that I can suggest only as an idea, but not as a solution, because to me, social media is not a problem that we find a solution for that. Social media is our platform that we can use them in the best way. So we can say that how we can use them. These are the ideas that I could suggest here.
Thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to need you to mute. Sorry, yeah, it's a little challenging balancing it on both platforms. But yeah, we've reached the end of our event for today. We've hit the 2-hour mark. So first off, I want to thank everybody that has taken part and joined and listened to this discussion. We've touched on a lot of important topics today. Hopefully we can have future conversations on this topic and many other topics in relation to Kurdistan in the future. Dr. Aghapouri, if you have any final words you would like to say before we wrap it up, the floor is yours.
Yeah, one person has asked me on Clubhouse that he said that you never mentioned Failis in your talk. Do you lack knowledge about us? First of all, yes, I have actually. I can acknowledge. Yes, I acknowledge that I lack knowledge about Failis, but I do recognize. I didn't mention any particular Kurdish dialects or Kurdish group or whatever language or discussion. That when I'm speaking about Kurds, I mean everyone. So I mean Sorani, a Haurami, a Kermanji, a Faili, a Zaza, a Izadi Kurds, all of them. So I do not distinguish between them. And when I'm speaking about Kurd, you can have your own Faili Kurdish national production as someone like me who could have Sorani Kurdish national production. So there's no difference between this one. You could have, but it's important that how we are. If you go back, if I don't know, you are on Zoom or not, but if you see the map, the photo, the picture that I have designed myself, it includes all diversities. So we, as an individual member of social media, could have this presentation and reproduction of a national identity. You, as a Faili Kurds, also could have the same role, even much more than me or someone else from Kermanji or from Haurami background. So we do not distinguish between the dialects of Kurdish or even the different religious groups in the society of Kurdistan. But thanks for your question. And again, and as a last point, you asked me, sorry, you asked me to say the last one. Thank you again for providing this opportunity. It was really good. Usually I don't go online and I don't go on public a lot, but this one I really like to be with you because I found it very relevant to what I am doing. And also I found it some young generation of the Kurdish diaspora has started this initiative. So that was really inspiring for me. And I wish you good luck with the journey. And thank you, the audience, for bearing with us for this 2 hours. I know it's late for most of you at the moment, but it was great to meet some of you here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Jiyar Aghapouri, for coming and discussing this topic with us. Hopefully we'll have you in future events and we get to have many more discussions with you. For the audience, again, thank you for joining us, whether on Clubhouse or on Zoom. We were happy to have you. We would like to hopefully slowly transition into just having Zoom events, so all of our audience can participate on Zoom. For the meantime, we will still use Clubhouse, but the Zoom code that we will use will always be 550 550 90 90. In Kurdish, Pensil Panja, Nawat. That is the code for our Zoom events. So make sure you write that down, and also follow the Radio Kurdistan page on Facebook. We will also be updating all of you with future events as well. Other than that, we've come to the conclusion of our event. Kakmani, if there's any last words you want to say before we wrap it up, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laluja. I just want to thank you, Dr. Aghapouri, so much for giving us this opportunity, and I thank you, everybody, to join us at this event, also on Zoom and Clubhouse, and we successfully streamed on YouTube. Thank you very much again, everybody. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And now we'll be closing the room in a few seconds. Just once again, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you all soon. Have a good night or good afternoon, wherever you are. Har baji, and take care.